my topic is an interesting one, I presume, because it focuses on delivering open source into educational institutions. It's not a new topic, but I suppose it remains interesting. I'm the Managing Director and the CEO of OpenCoLab. We are a company mostly based in Cape Town, but we also have some offices in Centurion. So let's head into open source and the discussion around that. What are we going to be talking about today? In this session, about the what, the hows, and the whys of open source. And my focus today will be working towards a product that is given to us, I presume, in an awesome way by the Koali Foundation and Koali Co. And the three core questions that I would like to get answered is cost, control, and collaboration, because those are quite important in terms of the model that Koali offers. Open educational resources really focuses on saying academia will give their resources for everybody else to use for free. And if you use it for free, they encourage you to take that resource and improve it so that it will work for you, and you can then present it on again and give it back again for free. So there's some awesome parallels between open educational resources and open source solutions. Things like, well, it's open and it's educations, that's obvious. Sharing things, contributing things, working together, participating. Those are all concepts that we find in open source as it is presented by Koali as well. I suppose if we really have to dig in, so what is open source? Maybe a best or a good way to look at it is to look at it from a, how is it different from your typical proprietary software? And if we do that, then we should look at the conditions of use of the software. Now, obviously, if you read a software contract, there's a lot more than that, but those are the ones I want to focus on to this morning. The first one really pertains to the cost. When you purchase software from somebody, you may have seat licensing, per user license, number of student license, how many pencils you buy and sell license, that kind of thing. Now, open source in the Koali way doesn't really work like that. Whether you have 10 students or 10,000 or 100,000, it doesn't really matter. The open source does not have a price. The system doesn't have a price. Of course, if you have 100,000 students, your server environment will look different to when you have 10 students. So that'll be a cost for sure. The other three things that I refer to here really is about control. So if your institution is an institution that likes to take control of its own software destiny, then those three things may actually be of quite a bit of importance to you. So if we look at, I'm not going to go into the details of those, but those to me are quite important in terms of a business decision in moving forward. Yeah, it's free. It was nice speaking to you all, so I can leave now because it's free, and the lady before us, when she spoke, she said it falls into the petty cash category. Only 4 things you have to do, so that's it. But let's all be realistic about this. Not all open source is or are equal. It depends on the type of open source that we're referring to. So if you have, if you're a user of MS Office and you want to go open source, then you may want to go with LibreOffice. That is a completely different kettle of fish to Moodle. A number of your institutions will be using Moodle as a learning management system. It's as easy as downloading it, deploying it. It works pretty well. If you don't have particular needs or you're particularly fussy about anything, then you don't have to customize it and you can just move on. If we look at Koali Financials, which is a financial system that supports your institutional policy around finances, your procurement processes, then we start saying, okay, well, we can't just use it off the shelf, right? So that means there will be a cost. It's inevitable in the end. If you want to make changes, or if you need support, or maybe you don't have the skills or the infrastructure to run it, there will be a cost involved. It could be an internal cost, an external cost, or maybe a bit of both. But there will be a cost. So it can be free, and it is free up to the point where you've downloaded it. Once you start using it, there will be some sort of cost. So the next question we have to dig a bit deeper into is how much control does your institution want over its software? Again, LibreOffice could be something completely different to Moodle, which is different to an ERP solution. And control could be important in terms of your ERP solution. So let's look at, firstly, what are the typical elements which you should use to evaluate any IT system? Doesn't matter if it's proprietary or open source or whatever. It obviously has to fit your business requirements. It has to be provided by a reputable company or institutions or foundations or community. The quality must be there. Of course, it must be sustainable. You don't want to implement something now and tomorrow, oops, where's everybody gone? The open source guys are gone. Where are we? You have to look at that. Support. If you're taking something in-house and you want control, it's going to affect the skills in your institution. You have to consider that as well. Of course, there's cost. We've covered that one sort of. And if you're renewing systems, then I would encourage you, and of course I'm an IT person, so this is always a passion of mine, is that you've got to stay configurable, and your new systems should allow you to customize. And we'll get to the details of that. But those things, they apply everywhere. It doesn't matter what you're doing. So if you want to be in control, there's a few ways in terms of software development and delivering a solution that you can stay in control. I'm not presenting this as an exhaustive list of things that you should consider, but just a few highlights. So your institution can say, you know what, we're sick and tired of these people giving us systems, we just want to do our own thing. Now, depending on the size of the solution, that may not be a bad choice. If it's ERP, I've developed a student system, it takes a bit of time, and it costs a bit of money. So if you go alone, remember that the cost is all for your institution. You're not sharing with anybody. If you're going into collaborative development, which is what the Koali Foundation and Koali Co does, then it means you're starting to share costs and you're starting to share strategies, which includes maybe best practice. Doesn't matter if you're wanting control or we look at buy now, customization is still important. Think about policies. We all have Poppy that has now come into our lives, and we have to say, oops, we have to change something. So you have to have that control to change. Do you want that control internal? Do you want to externalize it? And if you do build a new system or implement a new system, then extensions to that system should be mindful. It's really something you have to work and embrace with and not do it in a silly way. Of course, in the control solution, there is no per user licensing cost. Open source, like the Koali one, or like the one that you will build yourself, as I said before, doesn't matter if you have 10 students or 10,000 students. The solution, the software, is not going to cost more or less. If you're having it on site at your own institution, you're running it. Okay? There are a few exceptions to the rule there, but for Koali, that is the truth. If you're saying, no, control isn't really what I want to do, I'll just buy, then that's also not a bad decision. You can do the proprietary on-site thing. Mostly it's an on-site or a one-size-fits-all solution. So for 20 institutions, you can have it at your site, and it more or less works the same for everybody. You can even buy open source on site. So now you're going to tell me I'm a liar because I just said it was for free. It's only going to cost you be a buy solution if you outsource the support and the maintenance and the implementation of that system to an outside company. Outsourcing, it's awesome. We used to do that, but we prefer collaboration. The institution knows the institution. Software companies like ourselves, we know software. It's better to collaborate than to be, here it comes, it's all yours, and there's a bit of disparity there. So you can actually buy it, but the open source is still free. Then, of course, something that's on everybody's minds, everybody speaks about it, is the whole thing of software as a service. And Even there you can buy it, and if you buy software as a service, then some of the old rules apply. There is still maybe a per-use licensing or a cost involved, although in SaaS they call it a subscription, not a license. And maybe you don't have to join annually, but you can renew on a monthly basis. Really just depends on your provider. If you go SaaS in the context of something like Kuhali, which is also possible, then maybe you can also impact the localization even if you're going for a software as a service solution and not an on-site solution. But usually SaaS also one size fits all. It gives you a few configurable items, and if you can live with that, then you are a SaaS person, go for it. Even in buy, for me, it is still important that you are able to configure and customize. Again, we have our own local issues where POPI or whoever else, or policies within your institution changes, you should be able to manage those. Customization, I think, is more of a risk in a buy and in a SaaS environment, but it's not completely out of the question, as a lot of proprietary tools also allow you to make changes. So in terms of control and the cost and the institutional processes, I suppose you have to ask yourself, does control mean that we don't have to go out on tender, and maybe it is the petty cash one, but probably not. It could be one of the other streams, because it may mean that your internal processes of tendering and that kind of thing falls away because you're taking everything in-house. If you're buying, then probably you will still go through the 4 layers that the lady before me explained. So that would be how much control, and it's an important question. The next point would be, what is the total cost of ownership of an open source solution? And I'm going to go back here to the points of modification, sharing, and the redistribution that you saw on the second or third slide, I think it was. Maybe for the buying organization, this isn't as critical as it is for business. Not that you're not business, but you know what I mean. For the person wanting the solution or for IT. But I usually find that between those two groups of people, we have the other business, not your business, and the IT. They like to do things on their own, and they want their requirements met. So sometimes modification for them is quite important. That they should be able to move forward and say, oh, well, POPI is here, so let's change our systems to go with POPI. But if you go with open source, then you can actually take that change that you've made for POPI, and if the University of Johannesburg and Northwest University and Stellenbosch University and CPUT or whoever uses that same system, they can get the advantage of the changes that you've made for POPI, right? So you're contributing something towards them. So you can share it, and best of all, if you all work together on that one solution to build POPI in, then you can actually redistribute that back to everybody, and you can even pass it along to the next guy as well. Maybe you want to share it with the University of KwaZulu-Natal. That will also be perfect. So the point of this all is that institutions can combine the effort to produce a common product. They can put it in a cloud and hosted environment themselves, so it can be shared and redistributed. Of course, in this process, you can share maintenance costs, and the implementation and planning strategies can also be shared. So it makes sense from that perspective, because you've got control, you can work with others, and what you deliver is for higher ed by higher ed. So supporting collaborative effort amongst institutions is quite possible within open source. Okay, I suppose we should look at the role players in this whole Kuhali thing and how it all works together. That quote by George Bernard Shaw sort of explains a bit better what it is. It says, if you have an apple, I have an apple, and we exchange apples. You still have an apple, and I still have an apple, which is true. But if I have an idea, which is a non-tangible, really, and I share it with you, then you have 2 ideas. You share your ideas with me, I have 2 ideas. And that is pretty much how open source works. So if we look at the role players, in a typical Kuhali kind of open source solution, we have Kuhali, and they really provide the core of the solution. It is for higher ed by higher ed. It's a configurable solution. And I suppose we could ask whether this gives us a free head start in terms of we don't have to start from scratch when we renew, but we've got something as a base to work with. The institution's role is basically to participate, collaborate, implement, and add on, if that is what you wish to do. I mentioned Northwest University here. They have, and we'll get to that a bit later, they've taken the Kuali financial system, they've localized it to a South African version, and what Northwest University now says is, we will share it with whoever wants it. Of course, sharing comes with a price because now it's their version, and the long-term maintenance of that, of course, is what you need to consider. But it's there, you can use it, they're offering it. The commercial service provider like ourselves usually partners with the Kuali company to deliver services and understand their methodologies and vision, whereas we also support local implementations on hosting and that kind of thing. So if we look at that ecosystem, then we have 3 potential role players that can share ideas of best practice in terms of higher ed solutions. We're sharing and we're all gaining. If we look at the AGPL in the middle, that is the licensing of this specific product. And that licensing says, you can take the core from Kuali. Okay, we've got the pen, but it doesn't have the inside, or the refill. You can take the pen and you can add on to it. AGPL just says, if you are in agreement with the way we work, then please offer back what you have added to us, because maybe we can make it part of the core again, and next time you upgrade, it's not a localization or a customization, it's part of the core tool. So you're sharing back. Whatever you share back, everybody else will get. So what is the value of this? Remember when you started out, you got a head start, that's it. It was for free, you got the head start. You participated, there is a cost. You develop something that you want, you give it back. That is not wrong because you got something for free to begin with. So it's not as easy as just going to download software. With some types of products, it really is about giving back. So I hope that the George Bernard Shaw quote makes a bit more sense now in terms of what open source always do, or in this case does, and I hope that you understand better what we're trying to achieve with open source here. So, moving on to Kuali itself, the background of Kuali is that it was a community of universities in the United States that started to build software for universities. And there are many pros and cons, and this argument can take us days, so we're not going to argue. They were saying that maybe proprietary software institutions does not understand higher ed as it should be understood. And there are some things that in higher ed, even in higher ed finances, are different to what you would have in a typical business. So they were saying, let's build something by a higher education for higher education. It's open source, as I've already said, it started in the United States. It has supporters and implementers, USA, Canada. The very first implementation of Kuali Financials happened where? In Africa, in Kenya. Yeah, Africa, whoop. And also now in South Africa, where Northwestern University will implement Kuali Financial System at the beginning of next year. And they're also implementing the first product in the Kuali Student Suite this month or next month somewhere. Kuali also offers you the ability to either deploy whatever they have in-house, or you can take it as a hosted or SaaS solution. On the right-hand side, we simply have what the components that are there. So Kuali Financials, which is our focus. There is a South African version right now. As I said, Northwest has done a huge amount of work to get that. That sounds worse than it is, but you can imagine that something like that has quite an impact on a system like that. So they've done quite a bit of work to bring that into that solution. And they're, as I say, implementing that in end of this year, which is pretty good. And as I said before, Northwest is saying we can move it forward in collaboration with them to other institutions. Of course, there's also a resource management product. They call it QuES. But I think most of you are subscribed to the info at RMRIMS, NRF solution. There's an open library solution, Quali Student and Quali HR, that is still under development. So if we look at Quali Financials, then it does all the typical things that any financial system should be doing. But it gives you configurability. So Northwest has now localized it. But despite the fact that localization was needed because South African rules are clearly different to those in the US, it still remains configurable. The base is configurable. Your accesses and permissions you have control over. The workflows are very, very flexible. You can attach documents, so you do not have to send the little or the big envelope with all the paper around anymore either. If your institutional policy can accommodate electronic documentation, workflowing, then that workflow is really excellent. It's parameter driven, it gives standard integrations, everything you need. Of course, looking at Quali Financials, we still look at our typical business elements that we need to meet to implement this kind of systems. Does it meet our business requirements as South African institutions? I think so, yeah, because it's been localized. Is it reputable? I reckon it probably is. It's been implemented at 13 of the big institutions in the US, Cornell University, the University of Maryland, University of Arizona are all users of Quali Financials. Of course, I don't think they would have implemented if they had any doubt about the quality. The sustainability, I think, is now beyond doubt, as it's been going for 10 years. I can mention to you, and I should, because it's the right thing to do, that there is a slight shift in how Quali will execute in the future. They've now added a Quali Co, which is a professional company, which will drive the development, and it will still be open source. So what I've said for the past X number of minutes, it is still the truth. It will still be the same. The move to Quali Co is for it to be done by a professional company that has targets, not profit targets, but targets to meet and renew systems. So I'm very pleased that moving into the second decade of Quali, they've made new plans, they've been flexible around the fact that the world changes and we need to change with it. Of course, support and skills. If you have in-house developers, you can maintain the system yourself. You can run it yourself. You do not need anybody else. If you have the need to use commercial partners, those are available too. Of course, it'll be awesome if you use Open Colab, but there are also other institutions worldwide that can help you. I think the other thing about open source is that maybe today you may be dependent on somebody else, but you can develop your own capacity over a year, 2, 3, or 4, so that you can become independent and be in control of your own destiny. Is it configurable? Yes. Is it customizable? It must be customizable because we are not the United States. We are here. We're better. But we need to be able to localize our solutions. Okay, so some final thoughts on this presentation. It really is about the strategy. If you want to do systems renewal, you've got to consider your strategy. Strange how I have that as the last bullet, but it was a late night. But you've got to decide in your institution, do you want control over your systems, ERP systems destiny? Can you collaborate? Do you want to collaborate with like-minded institutions to bring something new, not only to your institution, but other institutions in this country? And what are the costs of control and collaboration? Because there is still a cost. Even if you can get downloaded free, there will be a cost. You can take my word for it. Configurable, let's look at that. Can we achieve control through configuration? I believe we can do that for a huge percentage if your system is well designed. Even in a SaaS solution, if that software as a service solution is built very nicely and in a configurable manner, I do believe that you will have some control in the long term. Of course, if you want control, you want it in-house, you're going to have to ask the question about the skills that you will require to maintain this. So having looked at some of those, the strategy and the appetite of your institution for control or collaboration and cost and skills and those things is what will drive your decision towards open source. If you like the idea of being in control and having your own developers adding something on quickly and you not wanting to wait for somebody else, then this is probably not a bad model to go for. Of course, there are many open source products in this world. In the e-learning space, you will have Sakai. 5 or 6 of our institutions use a Sakai. There's also a product that we've developed that is synthesis offline mobile e-learning, which plugs into Sakai, but also into Moodle shortly, we hope, which just allows your student to take some of their work off-site. Or maybe you have a distance institution and you want to give them the ability to work off-site because they're not always connected. In terms of ERP systems, there's a few there. I've spoken about them. E-research, there's a few options. And then for reporting, we like to use Jaspersoft solutions. I hope that has given some clarity on what open source is. I would say that I'm a technical person, so this is interesting for me not to talk to technical people.